17 feet, and then on the far side, it's got a 12-foot wall because I'm building a bookcase there. That's where my intellectual repertoire will hide. And then in the corner, I built kind of a cubby where my office will be, but it's just not quite done. I don't want to. I've got a pretty expensive computer here with the monitors. I don't want to move it in there until the drywall dust is resolved. So I'm in my temporary can over here. But no, we were just talking about, you're in the psychotherapy industry. I'm in the psychotherapy industry. It's a nutty time right now. It's like the tethers of reality. Uh, the inmates are running the asylum sometimes, right?
Oh yeah, very true, very true.
And so some of the advice that you see given, it doesn't match human wisdom. It doesn't match long-term empirical reality, which is one of the biggest hangups you have, because I think it's an act of fraud to say, well, this study says, well, this study says, well, this study says, without acknowledging how many studies are disproven or proven to be absolutely made up years down the road. And so trying to figure out, as a therapist or a therapy client, what remains true over very, very long periods of time, it is tricky because politics has gotten injected into it.
That's. I'm sorry, I'm trying to post this live stream to Twitter so we can get people joining us.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, we're live on. Where are you? Got so many tabs open right now. Okay, yeah, I think I just posted to Twitter, so hopefully we'll get people joining us in the chat. Yeah, I mean, somebody posed an interesting question. I think it was on X the other day. Should we even try to think about therapy as like a scientific profession?
Right.
Because like I criticize it for like the lack of scientific rigor, but I'm wondering, like, there's so much of a human element involved. Should you even try to go down that path?
I think it should, because to my mind, psychotherapy should be focused on healing the mentally sick, not the worried well, as our friend Jake says, and I think that's more profound than people might give it credit for. Because did you see the study years ago that having a consistent relationship, and I believe it was women particularly, with a hairstylist that you would talk to once a month, or for men, just having a relationships that you can consistently kind of discuss and unload things, had almost the efficacy of seeing a therapist.
Wow.
And because I'm sure you've seen it, but I definitely have. I've had clients come in, and the sessions they want, the things that they're wrapped around the axle about, are just day-to-day human concerns. But they've been seeing therapists for years. And so what they've learned to do is outsource at however many hundreds of dollars a session their own ability, their own efficacy in solving their own problems, right? Which I think is reprehensible. That's more, to me, that's more consulting life coaching. When I talk being a mental health professional, I'm talking about somebody with debilitating anxiety, depression. Some of my favorites are BPD girlies, as I call them, the borderline personality disorder girls.
Are you the BPD whisperer?
Man, I try. My heart goes out to these girls so much, because it's typically BPD, to my understanding. And I say to my understanding because sometimes I study, and I think I understand something, and I go from that perspective, and then a year later I realized that, like, either everybody changed everything when I wasn't watching, or I'm just a moron and never understood it to begin with. But anyway, with BPD, typically it's a woman who was raised by a narcissistic parent. BPD is kind of the shadow that comes out of a narcissistic parental relationship. And so when a young man has it, he's more likely to get diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
They're both in the
Again,
cluster B area.
within the cluster B, but for
Yeah.
males, it comes off with a lot more anger. I can't say violence because some of these BPD girlies are the best princess disorder. Some of them can be quite violent, spicy, but it manifests a bit differently in the male sex, and so males are more likely to be antisocial personality disorder, whereas these girls have this hot and cold cycle that just ruins their lives. And it became interesting to me because in grad school I had a very woke liberal professor who didn't like me, and by any means, if you can imagine. Anyway,
I don't know why.
yeah, well, right, but she said that she screens clients for BPD and refers them out every time. She will not see them, and recommended we do the same because she said it's just one of those impossible mental health maladies, and I just don't believe that.
Mm.
You know, there's always there's got to be a way, unless somebody's like, I don't know, severely like schizophrenic from birth.
Here's a question that came up at work for me. I think it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Guys talking about, is it possible to cure BPD, or is it essentially kind of a series of band-aids that you would use with like DBT techniques to kind of cover over, like is it curable, I guess?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I've had this conversation many times. Uh, Curable in the way that, like, if you get a severe break in your arm and you heal it, and then when the weather drops, you know, gets really cold, the barometer goes up, you feel a slight ache in your arm forever. Is your arm cured? Is it fixed? Yes. Can you tell it's still there? Yes, also. But can a person lead a happy, effective, warm, loving life with BPD? Yes. And I say that because, God, there's a lot of meanness about it to these girls that are some of the most sensitive on earth. That's why it's best princess disorder. Uh, but the things that are said to them are so cruel and mean that suicide and self-harm is a huge risk, right? I think it's the same reason I hate this the intersectional systematic oppression thing.
Mm.
If you truly believe, like, if, like, I'm a white dude, right? They're gonna say, oh, you can't experience racism. Okay, cool. But if I was a white dude and I wanted to go down that rabbit hole of, you know, super secret reptilian Jews run the world and I'll never have a chance, because, you know, the Jews have teamed up with Team India, and they're all, you know, they're going to take my land and take my jobs. If I truly believe that and there's nothing I can do about it, I'm either going down the route of suicide, giving up, or mass public violence, right?
They're both like two sides of the same coin of that victim mentality.
It really is. And so you've got to be careful. It's like, uh, yeah, there can be significant influences in the world around you. There's always going to be, right? But that doesn't mean you as an individual don't have efficacy, right? Which is why with we're not sociologists. We are, well, kind of in a way, for the layman, psychologists, but psychotherapists, working with a single individual, and particularly that single individual within their key relationship, like their spousal relationship, or within the key unit of their family, you can change somebody's entire trajectory. Now, I'm a big fan of the solutions focused sort of thing, right?
Mm.
To where one of the first things we do when I'm working with men or women is we figure out what their virtues and their values are. What's their driving virtues and values? And I borrow a lot, I steal a lot from Dr. Jonathan Haidt, peace be upon him, who gives freely to all.
Peace be upon him.
What's that?
Peace be upon him.
Peace be upon him. I borrow greatly from his indexes, and I help my clients typically figure out what of his moral indexes is it judgment and justice, is it the equality and fairness, is it the tradition, is it the purity, what drives their decisions more on those polarities. It is fascinating. Most people will pick will find themselves somewhere on those 5 or 6 indexes. I don't remember how many he has right now. Some only do pick from 2 or 3. The other ones are like, I really don't care about tradition a lot. When I work with more progressive clients, a lot of times they just simply don't care about tradition, and they'll claim that they don't care about purity, like because they think moral purity. And and you can reframe it. Okay, well, so you think Priuses are stupid and we don't drive electric cars for the environment? Like, oh my God, no, we do. And it's like, okay, you do care about purity in your own way, irreligious way. But anyway, usually when I'm working with couples, I will be able to find where their conflicts are predictable because they have a huge polarity on one of those indexes. In most cases, if they're a functional relationship, they'll be kind of side by side, shoulder to shoulder on most things. And then like, God, what was one I had the other day?
That's so fascinating to me. Like Haidt's moral foundation theory, like you hear it applied to like social psychology, and you've been able to apply it to therapy, which I think is real. I've never heard anybody talk about that before.
Yeah, me neither. But I'm not going to do the wrong thing just because everybody else does it. So when I discover with a in a couple's relationship that they have an extreme polarity within their moral reasoning, I can with huge certainty predict where their conflicts, where their next conflicts are going to arise from. Now, once they know that, and what I tell them is, if you can give it a name, you can give it a life, and if you can give it a life, you can kill it. Right? And so once they kind of understand these arguments, these debates, these like, what the hell is wrong with this person I married? How are they so stupid at this? And it becomes this all-consuming focus for them. Well, once they understand it's literally just a difference of perspective, they can kind of war game how to not have those fights or to disagree well. As I see on Christian Twitter or X, there's this new concept of disagree well, meaning
I've heard called fighting fairly.
Right. Well, dude, is that even possible? You've seen some of the people that we get in on.
Yeah.
I like to just go straight to the mats with them, like people's elbow for justice. And I probably need to stop. But anyway, I do go on and on. So yeah, how did we even get on that?
We're talking about BPD, and the BPD clients I think are really interesting because to me it kind of disrupts a lot of the social justice idea of like oppressor and oppressed narrative.
Yeah.
Because with a BPD client, they're probably among your clients, they're probably going to be the ones that are most distressed. They're hurting the most, but also like they're the most difficult client. In my experience, the most difficult clients, and the ones most likely to try to manipulate you. So you've got, how do you put them in this like simplistic black and white binary of you know, kind of oppressed or oppressed?
You can't, and you shouldn't, and trying to help address some of the core traumas that kind of made them this way, usually having to do, some sort of parental betrayal that kind of developed them down this path. But then also helping them through kind of a dialectical behavioral way, realizing just how much control they actually do have on their lives is difficult because many of the BPD clients I've worked with have told me that the problem that they've had with other therapists is this concept or this push for affirmation. They affirm their feelings no matter what, even when they know their feelings are just downright crazy and wrong. One of the things I do to work with them is to, you got to be very careful in challenging a BPD girly because my Lord in heaven, they can go on an entire crusade over nothing. Mm-hmm. I've gotten pretty good at it, building the rapport to where we can disagree agreeably. And then typically taking their spouse after I've been able to model how to give feedback and recognizing the signs of when that feedback through it's completely irrational, but it'll cause them to split or they'll start spiraling out of control. And you're like, where the hell did this come from? Now that's exhausting to be in a relationship with, right? It can be absolutely exhausting. So a lot of these significant others have given up trying to speak reason, and they're just kind of like white knuckling it through life. But it can get a lot better. And you can't, yes, some things were done very poorly to them. That doesn't mean they're a victim. And it absolutely doesn't mean you can talk to them or should talk to them as though they are a victim, because giving people a sense of hopelessness, it goes back to like very early psychological research about locus of control. And I use a lot of whiteboards in my clinic. And so with these BPD girlies, I will describe like a damn college lecturer internal versus external locus of control. And why it is so important to have almost a retardedly confident vision of your capabilities as an internal locus of control, because that will make you righter than having an external locus will, by all accounts. The things that happen to you instead of I happen to things, right? And especially when I can get these girls to understand that I am doing this, I am creating this situation, I am spinning. It's a fine line there, because sometimes they go into the over, like that means I'm a horrible piece of shit and I should die. No. That's where you kind of have to woo-saw. Find your woo-saws. Woo-saw. Breathe. Take a walk. It's okay to take a walk, that kind of thing. But it is crucial to get people a self-vision of their own efficacy. Because, we talk somewhat about ego and ego death and all these things. Sure, cool. I think ego's just something you got to be aware of and manage. Utilize it as a tool, and don't let people walk over you, right? Yeah, anyway.
So here's a pet theory of mine that I want to run by you. I think the masculine half of cluster Bs, your narcissists and psychopaths or antisocial,
right,
there's something appealing about that to women a lot of times.
Yeah.
And the feminine cluster Bs, borderline and histrionic, there's something appealing about that to men. So like a narcissist, for instance, like women always complain about how terrible narcissistic men are, but a lot of them are attracted to that confidence they see early in the relationship, right? That narcissists project, either falsely or not, but it's something that's appealing. And on like the borderline histrionic side, you have this high emotional intensity where a woman will like latch onto you and makes you feel really good about yourself, really wanted as a man, because that high emotional intensity early on. So you have like men complaining about crazy psycho women and women complaining about narcissistic men. But the reality is like there's something inside of us that's drawn to some of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I concur with you. There's another more crude term for BPD. I call it best princess disorder. Others say best pussy disorder. Because the passion, the cling, the attraction tends to be made of hot white lava fire until the moment it's not, and you get stabbed or something, or a plate thrown at your head. I think a lot of men desire for that the upswing without really comprehending how severe the downswing is, right? And I do think that women naturally often, they want a wild animal, they want a beast, a dangerous monster who's their beast and dangerous monster. I pay a lot less attention to what women say about what they want versus what they do.
It's called stated preferences versus revealed preferences.
Yes. And for whatever reasons, I find that women, female clients, shit test the men that they bring in a lot by stating something, that they want something, and then being very upset when they get it.
Mm.
And so I tell men, pay attention that there is a signal. Don't try to take the signal itself too seriously, like the words, the pattern of the signal, but the fact that there is a signal, that's what you need to suss out. And I think a lot of women find the romantic pursuit of getting a man who understands them without them having to explain is the stuff of internal fantasies, also achievable, but it requires a man to have a bit of cocksuredness,
Mm.
of almost many times, and without getting impolite here, many times ignoring verbally what the woman in your life says versus what you've been able to suss together she wants. What media does she consume? What people did she use to date? What books does she read about? Because they have this internal world, right? That is I think much more difficult to suss out and pull out for men than it is women with women. I think women have very different conversations with each other than they do with the men in their lives.
It's like the socially correct answer is I want a really nice, polite guy, but then like I read about fantasy novels about Tarzan or something.
Right, the 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah,
Haha.
yeah.
Um, and I see this in Christian couples a lot, where we right now in modern American Christianity, there's not a good place for male anger, male aggression, male sexual function, and so you end up getting a lot of these man child, like, man pat boobed candy eating sweet boys that women don't really like. But I think a lot of those men exist because women have been so loud about how they want these safe, nice guys.
Mm.
But then the media that they pursue is they want the Jason Momoa types, right? They want the thick, tight, solid muscle mans that can control situations, but be nice to them. You have to always be nice to them. A lot of women don't mind if you're a brute to the world around you, as long as you're nice to them,
Mm.
is what I've discovered.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I feel like you're weaving a very tight, narrow path with kind of this, these female preferences that I feel like we've known for all of history. You go back to like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the
Mm-hmm.
early alpha males. Like we've always known kind of what women want, but
Right.
we've got this newer kind of feminist Me Too culture where it's like, yeah, don't be any of that. And so it's like, well, I kind of want to get a date, but I also don't want to get shamed and canceled. You know what I mean?
And that will happen. I've been married for 20 years. I am so thankful I'm not in this current dating market, because uh, I find very, very often when my female clients come in talking about loneliness, and it's they themselves that shit tested and sabotaged potential suitors so hard that there's nobody left on their leaderboard.
Mm.
And I have to work with these people to, one, becoming comfortable with what they actually want, and then being able to articulate what they actually want without the contradictions that are so much part of the romantic framework between men and women. There's a lot of contradictions. Um, a lot of women still very much love the chase, the feel of being desired, the feel of having this arcing female electrical power, feminine electrical power, and finding a man at some point that is strong enough, has the masculine energy enough to contain not control, but contain that feminine force, the difficulty becomes for a lot of women, especially high functioning, powerful women that, have been successful in education and careers, is that they don't know when to stop with the shit testing, because you can break any barrier with enough time. I mean, drips of water on concrete can erode it, give it 1,000 years. At some point, you have to have your own control, self-control of, I'm going to repose myself into this man or into this relationship. I'm not going to continually test it. Now, this is also one of the tricky things about the modern advice given to men about being more vulnerable and vocally emotional with your women, with the women in your life. I think that's primarily terrible advice, because while it might be warm and fuzzy at the moment, I think for a lot of women, realizing just how dark and harsh and hard and stressful male thinking patterns can be, revealing that to the woman, who I think women's minds and emotions work in much more of a continuum of all things, all the time, all at once. I think it can overload the circuits and cause extreme distress, which is why it's important for men to have other men to talk to with great frequency. We see this in military communities where guys will come home and their wives will ask them, tell me what it was like, how are you doing, what's going on? And they'll finally unload on them just what modern combat and warfare is like. And these women will just then mentally spin out of control, and all of a sudden the husband is being nursemaid to his non-deployed wife because she's so stressed out about what he just experienced, right?
I have to take care of you because of your response to my experience.
Very often. It's not everybody. I mean, it's not everybody, but nothing is ever everybody. But I think as an average, I think women communicate much more to relate. I think men typically, when it's male to male conversation, communicate to orient to problems, to orient towards solutions instead of relating. You've seen it. I mean, I've got a construction company as well. Sometimes guys will show up on a work site and it might be days before you even know their name. But you're able to get things done quickly if they're capable and cogent, just because of the solutions focus.
My mom used to tease me when I was a little kid that I'd go out on the playground and I'd be playing with these kids and she'd be like, "Who's your friend?" I'm like, "I don't know." Right. And like even into adulthood, I'll have guys I played pickup basketball with for years. It's like, "Hey, what's up, bro?" And have no clue what their name is.
No, yeah, it's and women find that to be so funny, or if they sometimes don't like men, rude, and evidence that men are just like some flawed, shallow being. I tend to accept women as they are and men as they are, and I don't try to make them either one. I think there's going to be masculine traits and feminine traits that both, men and women can have and capture. But yeah, we live in these just incredibly, funny times where, well, not to get too biblical on you, but good is evil and evil is good. The things that make us healthy and happy are said to make us not healthy and happy, and the things that literally make us go crazy and be unhappy are celebrated. And it's just one of the funniest things to me, having lived over in Europe for a while. I'm really very familiar with the Scandinavian Nordic cultures, and I say Scandinavian because Scandinavia typically entails Denmark, Norway, Sweden, but not Finland. But Nordic entails Finland. Yeah, completely different language roots. Like the Sweden, I'm fluent in Swedish. Sweden, Norway, Denmark have Germanic language roots, and Finland does not. I think Finland and Hungary have similar language roots.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Very interesting. But in any case, a lot of they handle their leftoids way better than America does. They handle their liberal, like, very left types, way better than America does. They've been down like the transgender road about 10, 15 years further than we are.
Yeah.
And they've come to some very, great conclusions about like how to treat a gender dysmorphic kid or somebody who has gender identity issues. They found, in fact, and this is what I had mentioned the other day on one of your threads, that if you take a kid that's 11 that thinks that they're the wrong gender and treat them for autism, by the time they're 25, they will have at like 96% certainty leveled out into one of the two binaries.
Wow.
Right? And this was a huge longitudinal study, right? Which goes absolutely in the face of the American gender identity movement right now, because it's political. It's not about mental health. It's political. They think it's some new civil rights movement because they missed the last one, Anyway, so man, I brought up Scandinavia for some reason.
They handle their leftists better than we do.
They very much do. Oh, that's it. A Finnish study came out, I want to say 2 years ago, that woke. It's these neo-Marxist ideological views on the world reflect when somebody espouses woke views. Typically, they're going to have a lot more anxiety, a lot more depression, and just general unhappiness across the board. And so when I see people, particularly in our industry, who say, I'm woke, I'm so empathetic, you're just an evil, mean, white heterosexual male, I'm way better than you because I have these ideological approaches, I have to look at them and say, yeah, you're probably actually just a bit neurotic, actually. If we're to believe the studies coming out of Europe, where it is very difficult right now in America to do just blind empirical research that gives whatever response the science would give.
That's been happening so much. There was like I think it was a recent NIH study where it was concluding that puberty blockers were bad for minors, and it got buried.
Exactly. And it's because, like, look, I think right now, and it's so sad because, look, I was a member of 2 different labor unions in Sweden. But here in America, I've always been like a union buster in my former like organizational development and HR career, because they were so dishonest and awful to deal with. It's like the Scandinavian model of how to approach like labor and society and work and even immigration actually worked for the common man, whereas here it seems like a lot of the more left-wing Marxist-oriented studies and approaches, it's the focus seems to be on astroturfing. Rainmaking, as I call it. If they seed the clouds enough, they can change reality. They can make it rain. Instead of simply reflecting what is, I think very often they try to reflect what they wish it was. Because if you release enough press releases and CNN articles and so forth and such, you can change people's opinions. We know this, from propaganda studies. And I think I see that a lot coming out of American academia. I'm fortunate that I'm culturally proficient and language proficient from somewhere else, to where I can actually see counterpoints that actually seem more fair-minded and focused on having an actual stable society rather than getting one up on white heterosexual Christian males, who are the devil, by the way.
Yeah. Man, it's wild. You talk about astroturfing. I feel like there's no better example of astroturfing than the transgender movement, where it's like, 10, 15 years ago, if you were to ask Americans, like, do you think men should compete in women's sports? Should we chemically castrate children? Like, ask all these like major hot buttons. Should men come into women's restrooms? You'd have like 98% of people against this stuff.
Right.
But you had these major organizations. Basically, trans took over all like the gay rights organizations and started pushing the trans thing. The
Right.
U.S. government was pushing this stuff. Like it basically had like no like organic support. It was completely an astroturf movement.
Yeah, it instead of going from like the medical and science approach and building out, they went into the policy legal approach and enforced down, right? And but the problem is nothing built on a foundation of lies can have any lasting value. It's gonna crumble at some point, and when it crumbles, uh, it's pretty epic. And we're going through that crumble, I think, right now, where most normal functioning people, they like, if I put I told you that stupid story of the first time I went into a therapist where he said I was if I'd considered if I was a transgender, looking exactly like I do now. Um, and I thought, what a fucking joke, right? And I look into it, and no, this is like a thing that they do. It's like we got modern warfare trauma over here, or maybe you're my newest favorite, coolest political identity. It's like what's wrong with you, man? So uh, there's a pushback happening, particularly with the younger generation of men and women, who they're now identifying just the lesbian, gay, bisexual community with the trans, and by extension the pedophilic or MAP community. Because man, what was the show I was listening to the other day where he mentioned that the reason why the gay rights movement was so effective is when they started getting their social and political wins. NAMBLA, the National Man Boy Love Association, tried to saddle up with the gay community and say, hey, we're them, they're us, invite us in. And the gay community was like, absolutely fucking not. Absolutely not. Kicked him out, right? And rightly so. And now fast forward, these heterosexual men who put on wigs and a dress and now say, I am a woman, let me into your women. Where are the women at? You and me were like, wait a minute. I know that there's, not all of them, but there's a lot of men who are just psychosexual pathological freaks. And if there's 100 men, I can guarantee there's one, maybe two, maybe three that I don't want anywhere near women unattended. But I don't know which ones they are.
Yeah.
But when men are around other men, very often they can figure out who's who in the zoo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when all of a sudden these heterosexual perverse men can declare, nope, I'm a woman. I am no longer a man. I've got dick and balls, but I am a woman. It's a woman dick and balls. Let me in with the women.
Are you discriminating against the feminine penis?
Yes, I am. 100%. There's no such thing as a feminine penis. And so they're like straight out with that. It creates a big problem for normal functioning people. And I think this is why this younger generation, particularly in like high school and college athletic sports, they're looking at this like, I didn't buy into this bullshit. This is stupid. Like, that's obviously a dude. And the other thing that bothers is you rarely see a female to a male transgender person trying to get into these competitive sports. Because men are retardedly strong and dangerous. Like, my wife, who's lifted weights our whole lives together, she used to be a certified fitness coach. I mean, she is strong for a woman. But as soon as the testosterone hits at 13, 14, 15 years old, my 16-year-old's already deadlifting 315 pounds for reps. And my wife is like, she was like, he just started lifting 6 months ago. I've tried, it took me years to get to that level. I'm like, yeah, and it's going to get worse. Like, you are not going to be able to keep up with the male physiology. We are just wired to be war machines, right? Mm-hmm. As you can tell from the muscles. But anyway, so it provides a real danger, and there has to be a lot more of us, Ryan, that on the male side who are willing to self-sacrifice and say, yeah, nope, that's crazy. We ain't doing that. The data, the research will catch up, and it is catching up. But this is madness because there's another aspect of, we talked about the male versus the female, the masculine versus the feminine. There's another aspect of the female psyche that is both heartening and disheartening, of how often women become the most vocal supporters of whatever movement. They're the most, yeah.
That's something so interesting, because if you look at kind of the social justice movement as a whole, on one side you've got this Me Too side of things that's like, hey, men need to step up and take some pride in protecting women. And then
Yeah.
men are like, hey, these men that are going into the changing room with you, that's sending off some red flags here. And they're like, shut up, you're a bigot.
Right.
Something's not adding up here.
Well, we see all through history that when there is a fascist movement or a communist movement or a racist movement or an anti-racist movement, women get in there and go ham, man. Living here in central Montana, sometimes I'll meet racist dudes, like they're just like absolutely white supremacists, and the women that are with them even make them uncomfortable. They're so hateful and angry, right? You see that across the board, and I say it's heartening and disheartening, because when contained well, when women feel safe and secure around the men in their lives, when men do measure up and level up, women are the greatest supporters and contributors to the stability of society we have. Much more powerful in that way than men are. But when the orbit gets out of orbit, when the ellipsis kind of gets ruined, I think the core coding, the core programming of women gets manipulated, and they can very often become dangerous, damaging people to their communities around them.
So I don't mean this in terms of intelligence or talent or competence or anything like that. But when I was at church the other day, and kind of when church lets out, everybody's going through the doors. Like, all the men try to get, out to an open area where you're like away from, so you kind of let people pass. But like a lot of the women, as soon as they get through the door, they see their friends and they clump together in these little, so they're like blocking everybody.
Right.
And my thought is just like, women are herd animals, and that's not a shot on like intelligence or anything. That's just like how they normally, And I think if like what you see is like, that, hey, whiteness is problematic, or hey, we're castrating mentally ill kids now. And like that herd mentality clicks off. Oh, well, if that's the compassionate thing that makes me an ally, okay. Whereas men are more like, wait, what did you say? What are we doing now?
Yeah. Well, and the higher the testosterone in a man, the more likely he's going to tell you to go fuck yourself. Right. And I think that I really do think that there is a legitimate movement trying to reduce testosterone in men for that reason.
Can you speak to that? Because that's actually like pretty well verified that over the last 50 years or so, testosterone has declined a good bit.
Right. Which is why I lift all the time. I take maca. I take, all the other things. Look, I think that you've got, for the first time really ever, these massive global organizations that don't have the grace of God in their whole hearts. And they see themselves as playing God to either reduce the global population, or to, well, as kind of the I call it Antichrist Christian social philosophy, where they essentially want to improve the lot of humanity like Christ wants, but with no Christ in the equation. There is no redemption. There's only sin. There's only flaw, and so you get these, the what's called the open society, or legitimate.
Is that what's his name?
Soros.
Soros. Yeah.
You get things like Agenda 2030 out of the UN about how what's the thing from Klaus Schwab recently, the World Economic Forum, you will own nothing and you'll be happy,
And
right?
that goes along with, and you'll eat bugs.
Right, eat the bugs. I think that that is impossible to do if you have men who can tell you to fuck off, or men who can band together and say, hey, look, does this make any sense to you? No, it doesn't make any sense to me either. Which is why I think that the food supplies become so estrogenic, and why there's such a focus via the internet on separating people. Like, why are there what's that statistic that it's like 80% of the accounts on Twitter might be bots? They said 80%. That the people that you're arguing with, where you read stuff, you're like, there is no way an actual human being believes this. Probably they don't, actually.
Yeah.
Probably it's something algorithmic that's set up to make it so that people won't talk to each other. Now, freedom and tradition and the will for humans to live and thrive and be happy and procreate is very, very difficult for the forces of evil to put underground. The Swedes found this out. They had something called they called it was when they went through their hardcore like Marxism phase. It was called the New Swedish Man, Nya Svensk Människor, and the idea was that the state could raise the children, the state could do apply cradle to the grave socialism and social care. And it all fell apart during the 80s and 90s, where no matter how much social engineering they tried to do, human nature kept coming to the fore, which I think is why conservative, more right-wing political viewpoints are so frustratingly hard for our betters to conquer and defeat. That's now popped out in this kind of like pseudo-populist, Donald Trump movement, this MAGA movement. But there's something about human nature that aligns very well with right-wing political movements. Whereas these leftoid movements, they require massive amounts of Marxist brainwashing. Like, the answer is always, well, if you don't like Marxism, you have to read more Marx. If communism didn't work, well, you didn't read enough Marx. If you think that men can be women, I'm sorry, that men can't become women, read more Marx. It's like, it's dumb, right? Whereas you and me were like, no, that's a dude, bro. Like, no, just period. No.
Yeah.
Like, sure, wear a dress, but just stay away from the kids. Leave the kids alone. And that's kind of the joke right now on the right-wing internet. All you had to do is leave the kids alone.
Have you seen the meme where it's like something about drag queen story hour? It's like, how many drag queen story hours have you had at like the nursing home, or
right?
Why is it always kids?
Because if you can shape the young mind, well, two things. If you can shape the young minds, you're much more likely to win in the future just by demographics. But also, grown-ups, people with experience, laugh at these ideas for a reason, right? And that's one of the big problems I ran into in grad school. I was going through grad school in my late 30s, early 40s. I was already successful in a couple careers, married, and all the rest of it. And they would say this shit in grad school about therapy and human nature and systems of oppression. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I could actually give them hard counters. And when I really saw the wizard behind the curtain was that they never did try to debate me. They just tried to expel me.
That's problematic, what you said.
Exactly. Yep. And I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean, dude?
So here's an idea that I was talking to mutual friend Jonathan Cogburn, as well as Katie Kernodle, about 2 days ago, I think. And a point that I made that I was trying to flesh out and try to think it through is, conservatives are at a natural disadvantage to a lot of these big structural systemic conversations, because I think your typical conservative is very invested in their family, their church, their community, whereas a lot of Marxists are almost by definition dissatisfied with their lives. So they
Yeah.
have less connection to family and community and probably not going to church, all this kind of stuff. So they spend all their time thinking about how can we overthrow the system. So when you get in this conversation, there's like this asymmetry. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, 100%, man. And it's, look, I don't know if you've ever seen like a 50-year-old tradesman who doesn't have like vices of alcohol and cigarettes and, the white monsters, because not everyone can handle the big white monster. But,
I wasn't sure if you were
um,
talking about Monster Energy drinks or
yeah,
cocaine.
uh, well, both. Actually, I wasn't thinking, but no, I was thinking Monster Energy drinks. If you've ever met one of these guys that just works out in the sun all day, lifting heavy, picking heavy things up and putting them down and building beautiful projects versus a like in the gym like fitness trainer guy, the health of the dude who's just like a traditional tradesman, if he doesn't get into those vices in almost every regard across his whole body, is better. Like, I was shocked at how embarrassingly strong I was after doing, running this construction company for 3 or 4 years. I went in and all of my, deadlift, squat, bench press, they were all better by like 40% than they were when I was training in the gym.
Are you
I've got,
serious?
oh yeah, dude.
Wow.
Like a board of OSB, a 7/16 board of OSB is going to be somewhere between 40 pounds to 70 pounds. You offload 55 of those, lifting them up overhead, putting them up and sliding them up to someone. I mean, you could see my arms. I don't lift weights and work out anymore, but
That looks like some toxic masculinity right there.
it absolutely is. And you're welcome.
I
Actually,
mean,
you're welcome.
I want to say something. I looked at my YouTube analytics yesterday and found out that 85% of my audience is men. So I'm
Yeah,
glad we get to add something like this for the ladies.
100%. It's a little bit of that eye candy.
Yeah.
Shit. Um, but yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is there's something about just a simple, organic lifestyle that doesn't cause you to have to ponder it. It's like most people who went into mental health, I find, came from the most disastrously messed up backgrounds you can imagine. And a lot of them I still aren't ready to be therapists. Happy marriages, I find, typically their shelves aren't full of how to be happy in a marriage books.
Hmm.
Instead, their shelves are filled with Tolkien and Narnia books and, Lord of the Rings and other stuff that, like my wife, every night, um, she busts out these classic English American literature books and just reads to the kids for hours. Um, and it's their preference. We've got a massive, like, 50 whatever, 60 whatever screen inch TV and PlayStations and stuff, and they would rather just sit at mama's feet and listen to her read. And I
Hmm.
appreciate that so damn much.
That's so cool.
Well, and the point is, because she does that, we don't have to go in and get like a family therapist to fix our shit, because that is the fix. I think that a lot of Marxists and Marx, man, you look into the guy, he was the original fedora wearing, poor hygiene Reddit loser.
Neckbeard.
Neck beard, boils all over his body, probably autistic, horrible at being a man and a family man, and just constantly just writing these screeds about how unhappy he was. And even his dad was like, "Hey, dude, you're a loser, man. Like, what are you doing?"
His dad trashed him.
Just wrecked him, man. And
Yeah.
and so I think when you've got a fundamental unhappiness, you're looking for answers. And the problem with looking for answers is you might find yourself dedicated to the wrong one.
Hmm.
And so when I meet clients that are on their like second or third marriage and this one's fallen apart, it blows me away, Ryan, that that with all the therapy they've ever gone to, nobody has ever said to them, what is it that you're doing that's causing these things to blow up? It's always, well, he was a narcissist. Well, she was abusive. Well, you're, yes, queen, go girl. Because you can keep somebody in the therapy circuit for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, as long as you never have to shine a mirror on them. And so we work through it. It's hard. It's emotional and difficult to finally realize, like, holy crap, I've been a real punk for a long time. And then actually chilling out and not being terrible in a relationship, man, it changes everything for them. So uh, I think, dude, to answer your previous question, and I know I'm rambling like a son of a gun, why do leftoids have these massive um, systemic arguments? I think it's the same reason why, your Italian grandma who's like 97 years old doesn't have a medicine cabinet full of medicine.
Mm.
She has sun ripened fruit and, from scratch ingredients and a happy life in a happy community.
There was, I forget, I can't remember if it was Nietzsche or one of these like older thinkers who was talking about like these like revolutionary socialist type people, and it was the quote was something like, If this man even gets an uncomfortableness in his bowels, he sets out to change the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
Like every discomfort within myself, oh, we got got to overthrow capitalism or whatever.
Right.
The other
I
thing
hate
I
my
want to
dad.
say, other thing I want to say is the name of this podcast is Reality Therapy, and that's at least partly based in William Glasser's reality therapy. And he worked with a lot of people who had rough lives, a lot of people in prison and things
Yeah.
like that who had a lot of rough stuff happen to them that wasn't their fault. And he would always stress, even if 99% of the things that have happened to you and that are things outside are controlling you, look at the 1% that you can control. What
Right.
in your life do you have control over that you can affect? Because if it's like, I'll never be happy until we overthrow the capitalist system and, dismantle the white male patriarchy. Well, you're probably not going to be happy for a while then.
Yeah, that sucks, dude. Like, sorry. Like,
Yeah.
for real, man. No, man, it's, oh God. I do. I get couples come in, and, and look, sometimes it's women that want their husband to be more traditional, but the husband is so into the woke ideology thing that, like, he won't even consider it, and it's driving her crazy. But usually, if it is going to be a more left wing type of ideological problem, typically it is the woman really wanting to be, manhandled by her man in a traditional way, but then is shit testing him every chance she gets about toxic masculinity, this and that. So she's given mixed signals. Oh yeah, all the time.
Interesting.
But and I've also had some overly traditional, I would say, more right wing oriented couples that come in where it's like he's squelching her signal so hard that she's just miserable, and it's like, dude, that ain't it either. Come on, you gotta understand that there's a every individual, every human has its own, his or her own dynamic that has to be honored. Their own sense of uh, dignity, and if you violate that dignity, there's going to be payback, right? Which is why the trans question is so difficult, because I think with all the propaganda going on, they're not. God, somebody just recently said the trans thing feels like if you get a top surgery or whatever, it feels good in the short term for the same reason why cutting behavior makes a BPD girl feel good. It's that release, but then after a while, it settles back down into that malaise where very often autistic people, they don't like how their clothes feel against their body. There's just the sensory thing, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I think that Netherlands study I mentioned earlier was so important, where if you treat somebody who thinks they're gender dysphoric for autism over 15 years, it's like it was like 96% of them revert into one of the two binaries. And it's not that they're trans, it's not that they're gender dysphoric, It's the autism thing with the sensory overload, and they just feel icky being alive, right? And right now the political push is to, okay, well then let's cut your cha-chas off and cut your hoo-ha off, like, right? But that ain't it. That ain't it. And so, no, man, I think in the next 10 to 15 years, there's going to be hell to pay when a lot of these empirical signals of the longitudinal studies come out. There's going to be absolute hell to pay for people who've been pushing this without any right to push it. Because the science isn't backing it up.
What do you think the punishment should be? Because I feel like some
Prison.
people, yeah, I mean, I feel like everybody with W path should be in prison for the rest of their lives. A lot of these surgeons, I think, definitely go to prison. But there's a lot of therapists who I don't think they had any clue what they were doing. They were pushing this. There's like people around,
Yeah, I do, and this is why, like, the work you're doing right now is so important, because I don't know if you've noticed how aggressive and mean girl the psychotherapy community is, that if you say the wrong things online,
I've noticed.
Yeah. They try to, like, get your license revoked for wrong think, right? Most people I have found are pretty intelligent, but most people, when it comes down to it, are cowards. Actually finding people with balls and grit is incredibly difficult, whether you're in the military or you're out of it. And so I think most people, when they realize that the wind is blowing in a certain way, they go with it just so they don't get steamrolled. And this current woke ideological movement will steamroll you. Like, the amount of very brave anonymous posters that go on these private, like, Facebook therapist groups and talk about how anybody who voted for Trump is a fascist, and I will not render care, or, I will not take on clients for people who voted for Trump.
I had a therapist, Sarah Stockton, on here not too long ago, and she said she was talking to therapists who say if they had a client who's a Trump supporter, they would cancel a session 2 minutes before they got there just to stick it to him. Like, these people are disgusting.
I mean, it's absolutely unethical, and they should have their licenses revoked. And hopefully we get to a point where we put, like, guys like you and me, we just want to be left alone, right? They ain't gonna leave us alone. Marxism cannot leave capitalists alone. They have to devour the capitalists. So we've got to get in to the legislative stuff, to these boards, to these bodies, and force freedom. Like, we really do, by getting rid of these guys. Like, unfortunately, Pinochet was right. Like, there comes a point where you got to throw communists from helicopters. Like,
everybody at the APA needs a helicopter ride.
Well, God, man, it's like if a demonic force just simply won't stop, you got to go Deus Vult and go Crusader on them. And that's where the younger generation is. Like, I'm not so worried about, left-wing politics taking over America, because left-wing politics, the annoying thing about them is that they don't have the ability to tell their excesses no. What's really scary is left-wing politics creates right-wing reactive counterpush. And when that beast gets rolling, like what I see my 15, 17, and 19-year-old sons, what their friends talk about would give the classic boomer conservative a heart attack. And so these young generations growing up, I think, are going to be so radically right-wing because of the crazy, unlimited, unrestrained leftoid political nonsense that we've been seeing, that I think there is going to be blood in the streets.
What are you seeing with that extreme right as a reaction, and what do you do about that?
You have to reduce the power of the current left. There's a saying, like, when nobody ever likes to talk about, like, how Adolf Hitler came to power, right? We kind of a little bit know that Weimar Republic, poor, blah blah blah. But there's kind of a right wing little God, what's the term? Couplet. And then one day, for no reason at all. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
And it back during the COVID days when they first were able to get rid of Trump. If you wrote on Twitter and then one day for no reason at all, the people voted for Hitler, it was an insta-ban. And so then all of a sudden, yeah.
Wow.
And so then it became, and then one day for no reason at all. And then, once they caught on to that, insta-ban. Then it became, and then one day,
No.
insta-ban.
Dude,
And
old
so,
Twitter was just 1984, man.
and that's why, that's what I say, like, the left is Marxist ideology cannot exist in a free market of ideas. This is why they always push for censorship as hard as they can, always. And so, but when you push for that, you can't stop the signal, Mel.
No.
It goes underground and it metastasizes. And so the saying is, when the German people saw the excesses of the Weimar Republic and the public, like the pedophile brothels and the bestiality brothels.
And also they were starting to look at the rise of communism in Germany as well.
Oh yeah. There was just such crazy degeneracy pushed by these Weimar philosophers and social engineers that the normal functioning day-to-day German people said, all right, who can put an end to this? Who? Hitler raises his hand and says, hey, I can do it. They're like, all right, you're in, bud.
So I had a guest on here, Hunter Ash, who had like a very interesting hypothesis where he was like, communism or Marxism is like this virus taking over the body. And fascism is like the immune response. And the immune response is so powerful that it kills the host. But it's like its mission, like it has to kill this virus, killing the body. And it's like, does that kind of make sense? Like both these things are kind of killing the host, but the immune response is trying to kill the original thing, but it's also kind of killing the body. Like,
and that's kind of what worries, man. Because look, I live out in this place where a lot of hunters, a lot of hunting. I can name off the top of my head a dozen guys that can make 500, 600, 700 meter rifle shots. Right? It gets to a point, and these aren't assault rifles. These are basically deer rifles, or elk rifles. You get to a point where it's so bad that men who just wanted to be left alone start taking things into their own hands. And what's essentially the sniper community that can reach out and touch somebody from a half kilometer away or a kilometer away, bodies will start dropping. Like, we see some of this bizarre stuff in other countries with like in some U.S. states with like the trans identity movement, where if your kid comes home one day manipulated by a teacher or an academic or a school nurse to say, Mom, I think I'm a girl. And you're like, no, you're not. That's dumb. They can take your kids away. Americans don't go for that, man. They don't go for that.
I think there's like the type of people, both in the therapy community and in like society more broadly. You said people like you and I don't think either of us are driven by hate or driven by extremism, but we're looking at this mainstream culture and saying, look, like if you think people like us are bad, there's something waiting on the other side of this that you are not going to like at all. And like we are trying to stop that. We're actually trying to protect you by stopping this.
Well, it's like right now I try to explain to my lefty friends that whoever the hell Trump is and these mass deportations, that is the moderate approach.
Yeah.
What comes next is bad for la-di-da-di everybody. Right? And it's not like this is part of some evil plan. This is part of why the conservative brain is the conservative brain. We have a deep respect for how humans react, for tradition, for history. This is why Dr. Haidt, it's the funniest damn thing, found that conservatives and libertarians could explain and express fairly liberal viewpoints almost every single time, whereas liberals could never explain. Liberals just progressives just didn't have a theory of mind.
The reason I think is obvious. If you grow up in America, if you went to college, if you watch Hollywood movies, if you're just in mainstream culture at all, you're very familiar with progressive arguments. But you'd have to really go out of your way to find conservative arguments.
Yeah, truly. And again, it's because, man, you and I are both the same age to where we remember, like, even if it was that overly polite, like Pat Buchanan versus Ross Perot versus Bill Clinton,
Mm.
the points were out there. It was like gentlemen's and gentlelady arguments and debates. But then somewhere around, I don't know, somewhere after 2008, after when Obama got in the first time, somewhere after that, it changed to get so dishonest, on its face dishonest, that the conservative immune response was not allowed, so much so that it's metastasized into this. I don't even think it's fascism. It's more of a populist, traditionalist, leave me the hell alone sort of thing.
Mm.
I was so taken in by all these leftoid arguments that's like, Donald Trump's a fascist. So I went out and bought The Doctrine of Fascism by, Benito Mussolini, the one that he was pushing,
Oh, wow.
and read it. He's not fascist in any damn way. Trump's like a moderate populist at best, right? What I observed was the merger of corporate and state power within the tech companies. That's closer to fascism than anything, and that was what Obama and Biden administrations were doing. They were that's the thing with the Marxist arguments. Always, what they're doing right in front of you is what they're accusing you of doing, and it's a mind fuck. It becomes like there's no way that they're lying to me this brazenly. But then once you kind of realize, yes, as a matter of course, they will lie, because like in your woke mind book, talking about how for a traditional religious, I don't care if you're Christian or Muslim or Jewish, whatever, for that mind, words, the purpose of words is to come to a greater understanding of what true is, right? And when you have that framework and you meet up with someone for whom words don't mean anything more than what gets me more power and influence today, trying to mesh those two up is impossible. And we on our side, who have this traditional Christian view of good faith arguments and not assuming the worst about people, we're dealing with this pretty substantial demographic of Americans or people globally that legitimately want to kill off and destroy everything we love. And that takes a very, very dangerous mental switch in your head. That talk to any Marine who went over there, or soldier too, I guess, any Marine that went over there and enjoyed it. Like, I remember the day that in training, I was like, you have this like a moral qualm where you're like, man, can I really do this? Do I really want to do this? Do I want to be involved in all this, bloodletting and death and ethical things? And it's just like, I felt my mind switch one day, and I felt it just wash over me. Not only am I going to do it, but I'm going to be good at it, the best I can be at it, right? That is a really difficult thing to put back in a box. And what worries me so much about, like, we've got this massive population of veterans, very well experienced veterans, who have no interest in turning that thing off, and a lot of young people, men and women coming up, that kind of realize that things are going to go down a historical rough path. So it's ominous, dude.
I got a couple questions left for
Yeah.
you. We can see where this takes us. One is, I've heard you use words like demonic. I think I heard you use Luciferian.
Yeah.
Like describing this new culture, this quasi neo-Marxist culture, like from a Christian lens, how that's like really of the devil. I don't think that's like, at first I was like, wow, that's an extreme language. And then the more you think about it, like, I really don't think that's an exaggeration. Could you flesh some of that out for me?
Yeah, man. So Luciferianism, God, I wish I wish I knew you were going to ask that. I talked to a friend of mine who used to be a hardcore Catholic, and then he went hardcore atheist all during his Marine Corps years. And now that he's, well past his military service, kind of able to think on the things that a man thinks about when he's in his 40s, he's coming back much closer to religion. And Lucifer was kind of the shining one, beautiful, bright, shining star. Um, that fell because he wanted to make his own the things that were just God. He wanted to have the control, the worshipfulness, destroy free will, force humans to be perfect, essentially. Um, Whereas the Christ, it was based on free will. God's children could choose or not, consequences if they don't. The Luciferian thing, man, as I watch what's going on around, and as you're going through graduate school, you try to take kind of a secular, almost agnostic and or atheistic approach to what you're reading, because religion, theology doesn't translate super well to clinical experience. I don't think all the time it can, but not all the time. You're supposed to go like with the almost like a scientific approach, but watching how much chaos is injected and like actual real harm is attempted to be done to confuse young people, confuse people in relationships, people who are reeling and sad because of life events and losses. It's like that scriptural phrase, "An enemy hath done this." It's like, if I wanted to make people as sad as possible, I would teach them that their significant other will never, that they can never experience a fullness of joy with their significant other. No, instead, they have to fill their life with, polyamorous relationships, various mind-altering drugs, nonstop dopamine and serotonin injecting adventures, which, as you and I both know, like you read the pagan Romans, where Cicero, I think it was, talks about how at the end of his, towards the end of his life, the greatest pleasures he had wasn't thinking back to the orgies and the feasts and the festivals, like literally those things. Instead, it was the time he spent with his children and his wife in his garden.
I think King Solomon in Ecclesiastes says something very similar.
Yeah, and so there's a movement right now to remove what we know, like things we know from long experience, remove those from people's frameworks and inject something that's so wholly new and ineffective that it destroys people. And on the one hand, I think it's an infinite money glitch for the therapy community, which is an act of evil. And on the other hand, I think that there are malign and malicious actors within the psychotherapy community who want to harm people. And there's also one of the reasons why I'm concerned about what Trump just said about reopening the mental asylums, right? Yes, that is a good idea. We do have a huge mental health crisis in this country with the homeless and whatnot, and this almost bio-Leninist movement to create more icky freaks that will never be happy, that can be sold political solutions for the rest of their lives. But at the same time, the Soviet Union used psychiatry to arrest political dissidents, saying that the only reason why you could find fault in Communist Party doctrine is that you're insane. And so they would commit these people in these Soviet psychiatric units and essentially lobotomize them because they had wrongthink. And if you don't think that the modern radical American woke factions would do that at a moment's notice, if they had the power, you're crazy. So kind of back to your Luciferian demonic thing, man. Sometimes it gets really difficult to understand the yearning for destruction and pain that we see with some of these people if it's not coming from an outside influence or source. It's like these aren't normal human thoughts. Like, I kind of here's a good case in point a little bit. When I was in Sweden working for Amazon Web Services, we would send Swedes to Seattle to get the fairy dust on them, to Amazon headquarters, and they would be
Do
like,
they call it that? Get the fairy dust on them?
yeah, yeah. Because I mean, it was great for Americans, man. We would go there and we would see this massive, like just this one of America's greatest tech cities, and be like, there where the magic is happening, right? When I moved to Sweden and we started sending Swedes back over there, they would come back completely traumatized out of their minds because of the rate of homelessness. One poor girl had to step over an overdosed dead homeless guy to get into
Wow.
one of the Amazon buildings. She was so traumatized she needed an intensive psych. You gotta understand, the Swedes, very many of them are some of the sweetest, kindest, most innocent, almost naive people you've ever met. Just lovely people. And so for her, this was the first dead person she had ever seen. And in fact, she had never seen poverty to that level. So she's seeing this like gilded city of Microsoft and Amazon, uh, and then like complete despair, drugs, and death. And it's like, it really hit me. Here's this essentially this um, social democrat. The social democrat are the big political party over there. She's essentially, for all intents and purposes, a small s socialist living in this country with this great safety net, whatever, whatever. Has never seen anything like this in her life. She goes to one of the most left-wing American liberal cities out there. You're gonna have a hard time finding just random death and despair in an American red city, like a Republican run city, as quickly as you will find in these like squalor hell dens of blue. Why do they do it that way? I don't know. Why do they always create tent cities in Skid Row and drug use and people, taking dumps on the sidewalk and stuff that would never be tolerated in a like a European leftist country. Here in America with our leftists, it's celebrated. Like, why? It's like, are like demons whispering in your ears, guys? That like you want to harvest human pain? It seems like it. Anyway, I go on and
I
on.
feel like there's a split because I think there's some people, a lot of your like normie progressives would say we're doing the compassionate thing by giving these homeless junkies needles because now they're less likely to spread hepatitis or whatever. So they have some kind of justification in their head that just doesn't pan out in reality. But there's like some other type of person that seems to have more nefarious motives. Like if we create enough tent cities, we'll collapse the system and then we can kind of rebuild it in our image, after the fall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, man. So, and that a lot of that goes back to the Jonathan Haidt thing with very often the progressive mind is so hyper focused on equality and fairness, the care harm principle over and
Yeah.
above anything else, that tradition and purity and respect for authority just go right out the window. That like they create these this squalor. But what bothers you so much is when you see it again and again and again, and there's no attempt to be like, all right, guys, this ain't working. Like it's almost a celebration of human suffering instead of alleviating it. So I don't know if that answers the query.
No, it does. It does. I like that answer. So my final question, which I've asked you before, and I don't remember your answer, but I want to see if it's changed at all, is when you look at society broadly, what is one issue that we're not talking about enough that we should be talking about more?
Hmm. Um, I I've been thinking about this on these lines quite a bit. Is that when I when I'm working with young people these days, it's not like when I was graduating high school in like 2001 or whatever, where we thought like we were going to take the world by the tail and just like get after it. There's a hopelessness, whether it's left or right leaning people. There's a hopelessness where they don't see the purpose anymore in trying. That they'll never be able to gain enough, build enough, know enough to outsmart AI, to afford a house, to have a job that doesn't suck, right? I think there needs to be a lot more small community purpose focus. Like not big like yeah, maybe nationalism. I think nationalism is a big solution for it, but state pride, town pride, county pride. Like here in Montana, what I've done is I've got 30 acres. I made a, you know, we made a revocable family trust, put our kids in there as the beneficiaries. And the intent is everything we're building out here is theirs and ours. And as we can accrue more and more property, they, uh, when they find their significant other and get married, well, don't move to Denver, don't move to New York, move 500 yards that way. Let's build a house, right? I think that's something that the subcontinent Indians do way better than native-born Americans here. That there's a family dynamic, a family purpose that is absolutely lacking in current modern American culture. That I'm trying to revitalize with my kids and my family. That I as I talk to parents who've got kids that are struggling, like the parents are still doing the boomer thing where it's like, yeah, when they turn 18, I already told them we'll throw you a birthday party, then we're kicking you out, ha ha. And it's like, so they can go off and pay the mortgage to some other man renting. Are you ridiculous? Like, whereas dot Indians, they'll go in and they'll buy a house on a block. Everybody lives there until they can buy the house next door and the house next door, and then pretty soon they've got the entire cul-de-sac, and then within a generation or two they own the entire block. And then you got typical Americans that are like, well, that's not fair. These immigrants are just buying up all the property and taking over all the 7-Elevens. Cool, dude. But what you're not looking at is the dynamic of how they did it, why they did it, and why aren't you doing the damn same thing?
Why does that sound like such a novel concept?
I think we've over-indexed pretty hard on individualism, and strong links make strong chains. I can either have a whole bunch of just carbon steel ovals, or I can link them together and I can actually do something with that. So what I'm really pushing on my kids and any of their friends that they have around is the sense of community purpose. So
that's a good answer. I mean, I feel like, you know, 10 years ago, I focused a lot on what Congress is doing and sports and all these things out
right,
there. And, you know, more recently, I focused on my family, my church. You know, like Saturday, I'm having dinner with my siblings and their significant others. This tight community is like
right,
so much more important, and it's so much more fulfilling. Whether the
right.
Cowboys win or lose doesn't really affect my life a lot, but my brother and sister affect my life a lot.
Well, and um, you saw that study with that heat map that was going everywhere. With it was a
Yeah, yeah, the heat
concentric
map.
circle.
Yeah.
Yeah. With where it showed that liberal types tended to extend their empathy uh, least towards the people closest to them, and more towards more universal concepts like the trees and the planets and the goldfish and the people over there in Palestine and whatnot. Whereas conservatives rendered most all of their empathy and compassion towards their spouse, significant other, their kids, their family, their friends, their town, a little bit more to the state, a little bit to the nation, and then very little after that. And so liberals like, oh my God, Conservatives, this proves that conservatives don't have any empathy. Liberals are the empathetic ones. That wasn't the case. I and I think it was a really remarkable study because the have you seen the research which suggests that a person can know like the names and identities of maybe 250 other
Yeah,
people?
yeah,
Yeah. After that, it kind of becomes a fog, right? Just
yeah.
a mass. I think empathy and compassion operates much the same. If you're extending it out towards everybody, everywhere, all at once, unless you've got that, Buddha, Christ, woo-saw, you're gonna run out of steam. Um, so my advice to people is to focus that empathy truly as you're called to do it at the local level. Like we've got a small town here where I live where meth has just ravaged the town. So I went and threw my hat in with this local clinic here so I can help mentor and talk to people. I went and talked to the local sheriff who he said that there's a lot of people that he has to, put in jail for 2 weeks or more that he knows for a fact, yeah, they committed crimes, but they're not criminals. They're out of their damn minds, either mental illness wise or drugs. But he doesn't have the resources to have a mental health expert come in and suss any of that out. Because this is a very isolated rural county. So I'm trying to get in there where I might fit, trying to teach my kids to do the same thing.
So the way I would describe that kind of heat map thing is that conservatives tend to care more about actual people and progressives care more about theoretical people.
Yeah,
Like conservatives have tighter bonds with the people who are actually in their lives, but a progressive might say, well, the idea of someone in Palestine or wherever sounds
right.
good to me. You know what I mean? But you don't know that person. Like you don't know that person's name or what they like. They've never annoyed you before. You know what I mean?
And I think that also goes back to why, like, if I here in my local town, if I saw some dude just laying on the sidewalk like tweaking out, I would stop and be like, hey man, what's going on here? In Seattle or somewhere else, like with what my Swedish colleagues discovered is the concept of doing something for somebody right here, right now, here was so foreign. I'm gonna be tweeting about the poor kids in Ukraine while I'm stepping over this man literally overdosing at my feet, right? I think a lot of it can be performative, and I think a lot of it, like you say, is theoretical because it is actually tough to fix things in reality. It's way easier to talk about them. My God.
We got a couple comments here. One is Bashar talking about evil and therapy and locus of control. How it's easy to see evil as out there when you could fix something like internally. I think. And then Mark talks about what vision of the future are we looking to? Endless consumerism cycle and status signaling. Any thoughts there?
Yeah. Where are the comments at? Are they on your?
They should be on the right side of your screen under chat.
I might be a Moran, dude. Oh, there we go. Well, chat support. Huh? Not seeing it. Yeah, I'm a Moran.
Live stream chat. Does it say that?
Oh, there it goes. There it goes. Live stream chat. There we go. Okay. The Shar. Are you talking about the oh, I see his comment about evil. Is that the
Yeah,
one?
we need to remember the will of evil.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept because like the enemy also has a vote, right? It's something that we talk about in the Marine Corps all the time is that when you have your battle plans, like the enemy also has a plan, right? And so I think like I think normal functioning people have a real blind spot when it comes to the machinations of evil people. That like psychopathy is pretty rare, but there is a energy out there, a sense, an aspect of humanity that does want to see others do poorly, that wants to hurt, that does want to make afraid. Um, I think ever since 9/11, a lot more Americans of the younger generations have observed that there's some pretty significantly evil forces even within the American government. When COVID happened, it opened the eyes of a lot of people that a lot of it was bullshit and lies, in an effort to control and constrain people or get revenge against like small business owners. It was the greatest wealth transfer in human history during
That's
COVID.
insane. That's crazy.
Oh yeah, and like you can't tell me, maybe it wasn't planned from the beginning like that, but once they got that ball rolling, that was purposeful. And you can't divorce the reality of all these COVID lockdowns while they're telling you to go out and do BLM protests, while they're draining the middle class of their financial resources and opportunities. You can't tell me that that wasn't done on a purpose. That was some evil, evil shit, right? So yeah, I'm not sure what the will of evil means exactly, but I think it's something along the lines of it's out there and it's trying to do things that don't make sense to the good-hearted, rational mind.
What about virtue signaling? We got a comment from Mark about virtue signaling.
You got to be careful with who you align yourself with. I think whatever what do they say? Morality binds and blinds.
Was that Haidt?
Whatever. What's that?
Was that Haidt? Jonathan Haidt?
I think so. Yeah. Peace be upon him. When you align yourself with a group, whatever's valuable to them will end up being valuable to you. Like, you know, in the Marine Corps, it was much death, chaos, and destruction, and coldness and steeliness. Wonderful attributes and things to do while you're in there. Not so great for being a regular human when you get out, or being a father or a husband. I try to define where I want to be. I'm sorry. How do you put this? I try to visualize where I want to be in life and what group alignments will get me there more than not. Because you've got to have some sort of signal to society around you. One of the greatest lies I think that's been told and really pushed by the boomer generation into the Generation X, and embraced by the Generation X people, that I think is going away, is that you know, I don't give a fuck about anybody. I don't care about anybody's opinion. It's stupid. That's really, really stupid. You shouldn't care about many people's opinion, but if you find honorable, trustworthy, right-acting individuals or groups, get in line with them. Get empowered by them. Empower them by committing to their cause, committing to their worldview, just as they commit to yours. If it aligns, lone wolves aren't scary. Lone wolves get eaten up. It's packs of wolves that are terrifying.
You know, that's interesting, bringing it back to therapy, because I think, you know, you have to be cognizant in this field of, am I virtue signaling to look a certain way, or am I like seeking wise counsel and trying to get the opinions of people I respect?
Yeah, and dude, you see that especially on these Facebook therapy pages that are private, that it's like 99% of the questions are nothing more than virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Like, I will never post a question.
Am I wrong for caring too much?
I know.
Flame me if I'm wrong.
Uh-huh. I had a session that was really hard. Am I a bad therapist that I am down? It's like,
please affirm me.
Oh God, you're so beautiful. And that's what all the comments are. You're such a beautiful soul. You're so good.
You're a goddess.
I know. Yes, queen, go girl. No, I've got a very small group of guys, and gals that I talk to about some of these harder questions, because I care deeply about, and this is going to be, imagine me, Ryan, being controversial, but this might be controversial. I care deeply about getting positive results for a client. And typically within the first couple sessions, the client and I will define what that means. Like, what is, what are they trying to get out of this? And I've had other therapists be absolutely aghast at the idea of having a focus instead of just coming in like, what are we going to talk about today? That no, like, go to your hairstylist for that.
Yeah.
Not me. You know,
Let's trauma bond.
Yeah, right. No, we're not going to do that. Like, I'm gonna give you the side eye sometimes. Be like, what are you talking about, dude?
I feel like working in a rehab, you have to have that mentality of, I'm going to challenge the client. I'm going to confront the client. Like, if your client wants to go use heroin, you can't just affirm them. You know what I mean?
Hey, I've met therapists who say they can. Like,
That
I
that
think
is insane to me.
it's evil. I think it's evil. I think that's an ontological evil.
Yeah.
So I ain't doing it. So
Well, we've gone an hour and 40 minutes, which is about my length of time I can go between bathroom breaks. So I'm gonna call it here. But Jake,
okay.
thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I drained my my copper cistern here, so it's about PP time for me too.
I hear that. All right. Goodbye to all our viewers out there.
All right, rock on.